Hello, and welcome to the inaugural broadcast of Big E Education. My name is Ken Odom, and I've been a school board trustee in the Tomball Independent School District northwest of Houston for the last 10 years. In addition, a couple of months ago, I graduated from the leadership program of the Texas Association of School Boards, the Leadership TASB class of 2014. A friend of mine once told me a story about a little girl, 8 years old, third grade, who, it seems, was going to receive some fairly poor grades on her first report card. Her teacher, a very conscientious educator, spent a great deal of time writing a detailed note to the little girl's father. She outlined all of the educational deficiencies of the young girl and offered, of course, to help with extra tutoring. The next morning, when the little girl came to school, the teacher asked her whether or not her father had seen her report card and the note. The little girl replied, "Oh, yes. And you better watch out. Because my daddy says that unless my grades get better, somebody's going to get a whooping." Each of the players in this story approached the problems and the solutions to this little girl's educational deficiencies with a slightly different perspective, a unique way of defining the issue. As education leaders, we too come to the problems facing education with a variety of different perspectives. Big E Education seeks to broaden those perspectives, to help us engage in a dialogue that will enable us to, by taking in a different approach, begin to provide the education leadership that we were all called to provide. So what is Big E Education? In its simplest form, Big E Education says that we don't look at education with a little e. That's education that is provincial, territorial, that's all about protecting what's ours. Instead, we look at education with a big E, the big E that is global, broad in perspective. An education that says we don't care who provides the education, we don't care how it gets provided, we recognize that we have an obligation to lead that education. Really, Big E Education is about three things. It's about stewardship, it's about breadth, and it's about vision. Merriam-Webster defines stewardship as the overseeing and protection of resources worth preserving. The overseeing and protection of resources worth preserving. Perhaps the best example of stewardship that we can find is in the New Testament parable of the talents. You guys remember the story. In that story, the rich master gave to each of three servants a certain sum of money and asked them to be stewards, to protect those resources, to oversee the way that they were used. Now, two of those servants went off and invested those resources. They found means to increase them and actually came back and were able to give the master not just the initial sum that he had provided to them, but something more, something better, for that they were praised. The third servant, however, he buried his money, left it there, and then when the master returned, he returned to the master the exact same amount that the master had initially provided. For this, he is admonished. Big E Education is, first and foremost, a stewardship function. We are entrusted with the oversight and the protection of our communities, of our nation's most precious resources. It is our obligation to return those resources, not just exactly as we found them, but increased, better. Notice too that stewardship has nothing to do with ownership. In fact, in the parable of the talents, the servants don't own the money, nor do they actually own the means of the increase. Instead, they find others who can help them to invest the money. and by that investment, make it grow. In Big E education, we have no room for territorialism. Big E education says that no matter who has the idea or who is best equipped to implement it, public or private, charter or for-profit, we must, as good stewards, leverage those resources in order to ensure that we return the greatest increase on the resources that have been entrusted to our care. Big E education requires us to redefine the ways in which we think about academic success. Education is not about creating economic units. It's not solely about helping someone to find a good job. Sure, that is one potential outcome of a quality education, but it's only one. Big E education recognizes that equally as important as finding a good job is helping someone to find their passion, creating a shared cultural heritage for our students, exposing students to new and challenging ideas, and ultimately positioning them so that they are able to create some new ideas of their own. Big E education means that you can't reduce success to a test score, although tests can be useful tools. No, Big E education measures success, though, by the realization of each individual student's full God-given potential. Finally, Big E education invites us to be visionaries. A visionary is someone who is not constrained by the organization of the past, who is not limited by the manner in which we pursue education today, but instead is free to imagine what education might be. As leaders, we are called upon to shape the direction for the future of this grand enterprise, not to be bound by the shape that direction took in the past. Over the course of the next several broadcasts, we'll range across the full gamut of topics that are of interest to education leaders. We'll talk about the role of the school board. We'll talk about school choice, not just school choice, we'll talk about all of the different education reforms. We will challenge ideas and be challenged. In the end, the hope is that we'll have a really great dialogue amongst education leaders, all of whom recognize that we are called to be good stewards of a broad and ever-shifting trust. I hope that you'll subscribe and join me on the Big E journey.